Birmingham, Alabama. Roxy Theater, April 13th, 1956. Backstage, Chuck Berry was checking his guitar strings, unaware that half the crowd waiting outside the door was watching him with hateful eyes. Worse still, no one could have guessed that what was about to happen in the middle of the concert would become one of the bloodiest nights in rock and roll history. But Chuck Berry wasn't going to be just a singer that night. That night, he was going to save lives. The time was 8:47 p.m. The stage lights hadn't come on yet, but there was a strange tension inside the theater. The Roxy Theater was one of Birmingham's rare integrated concert venues, meaning that in theory, black and white people could listen to music in the same building. In theory. In practice, however, the left side of the theater was reserved for black people, the right side for white people. There was an invisible wall in the middle, and everyone was aware of that wall. The upper balcony belonged entirely to black patrons, while the ground floor was mixed, but no one sat next to each other. This was considered Alabama's progressive state in 1956. Backstage, as Chuck buttoned up his red shirt, he remembered his manager's warnings. Leonard Chess's voice echoed in his mind. The promoter had been crystal clear about the times. "Chuck, Alabama's different. Don't move around too much on stage. Don't even try to look at white girls. Sing your song, take your money, and get out." Chuck had nodded, but something inside told him this was wrong. Music meant freedom. Music meant equality. But in 1956 Alabama, music was still divided by color. At the entrance, 17-year-old Sarah Mae Williams was climbing the balcony stairs with her friends Darlene and Rosa. With her 75-cent ticket bought with her savings, she was about to see Chuck Berry live for the first time. She was actually going to hear Maybelline roll over Beethoven. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. At the same moment, on the right side of the theater, on the ground floor, 5 white men sat clinking their beer bottles. The leader's nickname was Rake, drunk, angry, and dangerous. He looked around and wrinkled his nose. "What kind of place is this?" he said. "Are we going to be under the same roof with niggers?" One of his friends, Tommy, shrugged. "But they said the music's good. I wanted to hear Chuck Berry." Rake glared at him. "Chuck Berry's a Negro. You realize that? You paid money to listen to him?" Tommy didn't answer, but inwardly regretted coming here. The lights went out. The crowd screamed. Black people stood up in the balcony. White people applauded on the ground floor. The spotlight hit center stage, and Chuck Berry walked out with his Gibson guitar, bright red shirt, black pants, legs ready for that famous duck walk move. His smile was brilliant, his eyes alive. He slung the guitar over his shoulder, stepped up to the microphone, and before speaking, he looked at the audience. The sight always pained him, a divided audience, a divided America. But he believed in the power of music. He leaned into the microphone and spoke in that familiar voice, slightly humble but confident. "Good evening, Birmingham. I'm Chuck Berry, and tonight we're going to rock this whole place, every single one of you." Then the guitar riff exploded. The opening notes of Maybelline shook the theater. Chuck's fingers were flying over the strings, his voice powerful and clear, his energy contagious. The white people on the ground floor started getting caught up in the rhythm. The black people in the balcony went wild. Music was tearing down the invisible walls. People were dancing, laughing, screaming. This was the power of music, but Rake wasn't dancing. Rake was filling with rage. When the second song came on, as Roll Over Beethoven played, Sarah Mae and her friends were leaning against the balcony railing watching Chuck. Sarah Mae was so happy that tears were coming to her eyes. "This is real," she whispered. "He's really there." Darlene smiled. "And it's like he's singing just for you, isn't it?" Sarah Mae was embarrassed, but deep down it felt that way. As long as Chuck Berry was on stage, the world was a better place. But Rake had stood up. His drunkenness had peaked, and he was riling up the 4 men around him. "Look at that," he said with disgust. "The Negroes shaking the stage, and we're sitting here applauding. This is wrong. This is Alabama. This is our place." Tommy touched his arm. "Rake, sit down. Let's just watch the concert." But Rake shoved him. "Shut up. I'm going to teach these niggers a lesson." Then he turned and looked at his friends. "Who's coming with me?" 2 immediately stood up. The other 2 hesitated, but the rage in Rake's eyes got them up too. But Chuck noticed something. The 5 white men on the ground floor were moving through the crowd, and they weren't headed toward the stage. They were headed toward the stairs leading to the balcony. An alarm went off inside Chuck. He'd played concerts like this for years, faced 1,000 kinds of racism for years. Something was going wrong. Chuck finished the song and paused to catch his breath. He thanked the audience, made jokes, but his eyes were still on the balcony, and then he saw them. Rake and his men were right behind the young girls. Rake had a beer bottle in his hand and was ready to break it. Chuck's heart raced. What was he going to do? Leave the stage and run up there? Call security? But security was already on the ground. Call the police? Alabama police in 1956 didn't protect black people. Rake moved up behind Sarah May and spoke with disgust. "Hey, Negro girl, this ain't your place. Get downstairs." Sarah May turned and recoiled in fear. Rake was drunk, his eyes bloodshot. "Please," Sarah May whispered. "We're just listening to music." Rake laughed. "Music? You're just a Negro who's supposed to be downstairs. Now get the hell out of here." Darlene lunged forward. "Leave us alone." Rake turned on her too. He raised the beer bottle in the air. "Should I knock you down too?" Right at that moment, Chuck Berry, standing center stage, took the guitar off his shoulder. The music stopped. All 800 people in the theater suddenly went silent. Everyone was trying to understand what was happening. Chuck didn't speak into the microphone. He just set the guitar aside and walked to the edge of the stage. His eyes were on the balcony. Rake and his men froze. The crowd was looking at Chuck. So were Sarah May and her friends. There was no longer a smile on Chuck's face. There was a serious, determined expression. When Chuck Berry came to the edge of the stage, the spotlights followed him. Everyone in the theater was holding their breath. No one could understand what was happening. Chuck pointed his hand toward the balcony and his voice filled the entire hall. But this time, he wasn't singing. He was speaking. His voice was calm, but there was steel in it. "Excuse me, folks. We got a little situation up there in the balcony, and I think we need to handle it right now." Rake and his men froze. All eyes were on them. Sarah May and her friends were still trembling with fear, but now there was hope inside them too. Chuck left the stage. He left his guitar there, left the microphone, and headed for the side stairs. The producer ran out from backstage toward him. "Chuck, what are you doing? The concert has to continue." Chuck didn't even stop, answering as he walked. "I can't continue the concert. Girls are in danger up there." The producer looked around in panic. "Let's call the police. Don't get involved. This is Alabama. It's dangerous for you." Chuck turned and gave him a hard look. "Every place is dangerous for me, friend, but those girls are up there alone, and I can't just stand here." Then he headed for the stairs. In the balcony, Rake was still standing in front of Sarah May. He was swinging the beer bottle in his hand, his friends waiting tensely around him. Tommy wanted to back away, but Rake grabbed him. "Where do you think you're going?" "You're staying right here." Tommy answered hesitantly. "Rake, this is going too far. They're just listening to music." Rake turned on him and looked at him with rage. "Are you one of them now, defending niggers?" Tommy went quiet. Rake turned to Sarah May. "I'm telling you one last time, get downstairs, or else." Sarah May's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. Darlene and Rosa were backing her up. All three were scared, but they weren't moving. Then footsteps came from the stairs. Heavy, determined steps. Rake turned and saw Chuck Berry. Chuck stood at the top of the stairs, his red shirt soaked with sweat, his face expressionless, but his eyes blazing. Rake was stunned. "You? What the hell are you doing here?" Chuck moved forward slowly, hands at his sides, not threatening, but his stance was powerful. "I'm doing my job, friend," he said in a calm voice. "I'm putting on a concert, and nobody should get hurt at a concert." Rake laughed, a drunken, defiant laugh. "Who are you to give me orders? You're just a Negro. Go back down and sing your song." Chuck moved even closer. "I will sing my song, but first, I need to make sure these young ladies are safe." Rake raised the beer bottle toward Chuck. "You take one more step, I'll knock you down too." Chuck hesitated, but he wasn't afraid. His eyes were locked on Rake's eyes. "You could," he said calmly. "You could beat me. But then what happens? Then the police come. Then the newspapers write about it. White man attacks Chuck Berry. And you won't be a hero in this town. You'll be disgraced." Rake's face turned red. "Shut up," Chuck continued, his voice still calm, but every word carried weight. "These girls didn't do anything to you. They just wanted to listen to music just like you, just like me. We all love the same music. We all dance to the same rhythms. What's the difference between us?" Rake couldn't answer. His friends had started backing away. Chuck took another step. "The only difference is skin color. And that's ridiculous. Music doesn't see color. Music is just music." Rake's hand trembled. The beer bottle fell and shattered on the floor. The sound echoed through the theater. Chuck quickly turned to Sarah May and her friends. "Get behind me, girls." They immediately moved behind Chuck. Chuck turned back to Rake. "So what are you going to do now? Are 5 men going to attack one musician, or are you going to leave here and forget this happened?" One of Rake's friends, one who'd been silent before, stepped back. "I'm leaving," he said. "This is ridiculous." Rake turned on him. "Traitor!" The man didn't care, headed for the stairs. Tommy joined him. "I'm leaving too. Sorry, Rake, but this is wrong." The two went down the stairs. That left Rake and 2 men. Chuck took another step. Now there were only 2 meters between him and Rake. His voice lowered, but his determination didn't waver. "Listen, friend, I didn't come here to fight. I came here to make music. And you came here to listen to music. We can still do that. But first, you need to promise me you won't touch these girls." Rake's breathing grew heavy. His drunkenness, his anger, his shame, it all mixed together. Finally he nodded, slowly, unwillingly. "Okay," he said in a hoarse voice. "Okay, I won't touch them." Chuck smiled, but it wasn't a triumphant smile. It was a reassuring smile. "Good. Then let's go downstairs and continue the concert." Rake and his 2 men headed for the stairs, heads bowed, like they'd been defeated. Chuck turned to Sarah May. "Are you okay, young ladies?" Sarah May was sobbing, but she nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Barry. You saved our lives." Chuck shook his head. "No, sweetheart. You saved yourselves. You didn't run scared. You didn't flee. You stood your ground. That's courage." Darlene stepped in. "But you left the stage and came up here. Why?" Chuck smiled, and this time his smile was genuine, warm. "Because music is for everyone. And if everyone's not safe, music has no meaning," Rosa asked in a shy voice. "Will the concert continue?" Chuck laughed. "Of course it will. In fact, you 3 can come downstairs and sit in the front row, if you want to." The 3 girls looked at each other, their eyes lighting up. Chuck escorted them to the stairs. When they came down to the ground floor, the entire crowd was on their feet, applauding. White and black people, together. Chuck took Sarah May, Darlene, and Rosa to the front row. In the white section, right in front of the stage, 3 seats were cleared. Some white audience members grumbled, but most were silent, and Chuck turned to them and spoke clearly. "These 3 young ladies showed great courage tonight, and they are my guests. If you can't show respect for that, the exit's right there." No one left. Chuck returned to the stage. When he picked up his guitar, he noticed his hands were trembling. But it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline, anger, relief, a mixture of everything. He leaned into the microphone and spoke, "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. But sometimes there are things more important than music. Sometimes people are more important than music. And tonight I want to remind you of something. This music, rock and roll, belongs to all of us. White, black, rich, poor, young, old. All of us. If you love music, then you're family." Applause erupted. Chuck played his guitar and began singing "You Can't Catch Me." This time the energy was different. People weren't just dancing, they were dancing together. When the concert ended, it was past midnight. As the audience dispersed, Sarah May, Darlene, and Rosa went backstage. Chuck smiled when he saw them. "You're still here?" Sarah May approached shyly. "Mr. Barry, I want to ask you something." Chuck tilted his head. "Ask away, sweetheart." Sarah May took a deep breath. "When you left the stage to help us, weren't you scared? There were 5 of them. They could have beaten you." Chuck answered honestly. "I was scared, very scared. But some things are more important than fear, and you 3 were up there alone. Helping someone is always the right thing to do," Rosa asked. "So what happens now? I mean, will Alabama change?" Chuck smiled sadly. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe, maybe not. But I know one thing. Tonight, in this theater, something changed. People danced together, they applauded together, and maybe, just maybe, it'll be the same tomorrow. Before the three girls left the stage, Chuck gave them something, an album cover he'd signed himself. He'd written on it, "To Sarah May, Darlene, and Rosa, the bravest girls I ever met, keep rockin'. Chuck Berry, April 13th, 1956. Sarah May pressed it to her chest. "I'll keep this forever," she said. Chuck touched their shoulders. "You keep the music forever too, because music is our weapon, and no one can take it from us." That night, as Chuck returned to his hotel, he felt exhausted but at peace. Yes, he had put himself in danger. Yes, he could have been beaten, but if he hadn't done it, he would never have been able to look at himself in the mirror again. Rock and roll wasn't just music. Rock and roll was an attitude, a stand. And that night, Chuck Berry had shown what rock and roll truly meant. Today, the Roxy Theater no longer stands. The building was demolished in the 1970s, but those who were there that night never forgot. And the story has been told for generations. The night Chuck Berry wasn't just a rock and roll legend, but a true hero. The night the power of music existed not just on stage, but in life itself.